Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and I want to talk about this case that we've been covering for years now of Ashley Govik. She was a manager, engineering manager at Apple, introducing new products into the market, and she discovered at her office location that it was on a toxic dump site. She began to try to get EPA, try to get the company, Apple, to deal with the toxic fumes that were coming out. And instead of dealing with it, they went after her and targeted her. And she documented all this stuff. She also was living in a apartment complex, which turned out to be across the street from an illegal Apple fab production facility that as well was releasing fumes, toxic fumes in the environment, and has been fined by the EPA and other agencies. And she began to speak out and fight not just for herself as a worker whistleblower, but for other workers. And people want to know why there are not more workers speaking out about environmental dangers and health and safety violations. And this discussion we're going to have today is about why that isn't taking place because of the fact that these companies will spend millions, tens of millions, and hundreds of millions of dollars to shut workers up, to terrorize them and prevent them from speaking out. So joining us this afternoon is Ashley Govik, who is a former Apple employee, but has been fighting Apple for justice for herself and other workers who want to organize and unite at Apple. Welcome to our show, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Steve. Great to talk to you again.
So, Apple, when did this whole struggle start? Because it's not the last year or two, it's been going on.
It's been going on a long time. And I started working at Apple in 2015, and I worked for them for over 6 years, a long time. And the chemical exposure from that fab was in 2020. I didn't know it was Apple at that point. But my dispute with them really started in 2021, and that's the year they fired me. So I started raising questions and concerns about my office, which was on a triple Superfund site in Sunnyvale, California. It's actually called the Triple Site because it's three huge toxic waste dump sites with a big mega plume underneath. And they didn't tell us we were even on the site or that there was the vapors coming in and historically in the building, maybe ongoing, or what their testing was. And I became very concerned, and even asking questions immediately was facing retaliation and being told not to share even my questions with coworkers or to document stuff. And I got really upset because I had learned how dangerous this chemical pollution is in 2020 when I got sick. I didn't know it was Apple, but I had discovered it was chemical exposure. And so I learned about a lot of this stuff. And when I was asking questions, they didn't have any good answers. It sounded like they're being very negligent, but then they're immediately like, don't send emails about this. Don't tell other people. Don't tell them it's a Superfund site. And even though I've been at Apple long enough that I was very loyal, and was kind of used to weird behavior from them, it crossed a line for me. And so I started making complaints and speaking out and talked to EPA. And Apple's conduct just became more and more aggressive and more invested in concealing. So again, they gave me a even NLRB now run by Apple's own lawyer. The current general counsel of NLRB is Apple's little defense counsel on my NLRB charge. And she came in and she tried to dismiss most of the stuff. But one of the things that even she couldn't dismiss was them giving me a 5-point balancing test to consider if I want to talk about safety to my coworkers. You can't say that to people that says that.
Well, I mean, the idea that they're trade secrets,
Yeah.
you can't talk about what's going on, even though it's affecting your health and safety.
Yeah.
That's a violation of your rights,
Crazy.
and it's a way of silencing workers. And actually, because you went to the University of Santa Clara and got a JD, you were able to understand the intricacies and the law and using the law to defend yourself. I mean, without that,
I would have been clueless. And Apple's senior manager of employee relations at the time, a couple months fast forward from where I was just at, by the time I was lodging formal complaints and really calling them out, said that they found it unfortunate that I had learned what my rights were. Because it's easier when employees don't know.
And of course, most employees are unorganized in the United States. They don't have unions. one of the reasons they
A
don't
union
have,
steward you can call in. That union steward's going to tell the boss, how it works, but you don't have that in these big tech companies.
and these companies want a union-free environment. Of course, Apple has a record of not only retaliating against workers in this country and conditions of workers, you were a victim of the fact that there was a toxic dump site. You were poisoned by that,
Yeah.
as I said, at your work location where you lived. And people were afraid to speak out. And
They
you
still
also had the
are.
experience with Apple workers coming to you who said that they had similar problems or problems of issues, and they were afraid to address them because of fear of being sued, of being destroyed.
That they had a whole long laundry list, and I think it was probably the number one thing that catalyzed me and caused me to just go become like revolutionary about this. And I think part of it was my complicity working there for so long and helping them probably do labor violations and stuff, and like kind of looking in the mirror as I saw what was actually happening in that moment. Because as soon as I even start speaking out to coworkers internally on like Apple Slack, and Apple's telling me not, don't talk to your coworkers, don't put it on Slack. I'm like, these are my coworkers, you crazies. And then the coworkers have these stories of just one after another, raised concerns, was completely gaslit about it, they never even really investigated, they retaliated, they concealed it, it went nowhere. Like the raising the concern, just no matter what happens, it's bad. Nothing good happens. And a lot of people were frustrated about that. And then as I started getting like, this was another thing they were telling me, like, stop talking to your coworkers in that Slack chat. Because I had just like dozens and dozens of people with these stories of like, oh, this happened to me too, me too, me too, me too. Here's my story from like scanning years. And then we're like, uh-oh, like this seems systemic. This has to be systemic if we have so many people with these same stories. And the same thing is just like deny, conceal, protect the abuser, gaslight the person making the complaint, like checklist. And it's the same HR and employee relations team. So we're like, was it like mine was that Jenna? That sounds like Jenna. And they're like, that was Jenna. Like it's the same characters. And then we're realizing like, oh, we never had a chance. And so like I guess like a silly part for the Apple employees too is being like, oh, Apple has all this PR externally and internally that they care and they'll do the right thing. And we're like, oh, we tell them because they said they do the right thing. But it's Apple. They have suicide nets. It's a suicide net company. And so that senior manager who said it was unfortunate when the employees learn their labor rights because it makes things harder, prior to doing corporate employee relations, managed labor relations in Beijing. And I said, oh, it was suicide nets. And he said, no, it was a vendor we worked with. And I was like, you see, I called him Mr. Suicide Nets because he was the one that set up. And then he's done corporate ER. So it was this like,
And they bring in government officials, Lisa Jackson, who was brought in, and you're
she's a retaliator. The stories of EPA whistleblowers that under her administration, they did crazy stuff in like the Department of Labor adjudications too.
and they run the government. They've
Yeah.
captured these agencies. Cal-OSHA, you went to Cal-OSHA. They didn't do an investigation. Here's Gavin Newsom, and before that, Jerry Brown. They don't want to, they have less than 200 OSHA inspectors for 18 million workers in the United States. I
Yeah.
guess it's a low priority. And
Well, and they said EPA. They kept saying if it's an EPA site, but I'm like, EPA doesn't do like safety inspections for OSHA. And then they were trying to gaslight me too, like we don't have coverage. It took me a while to learn has Whooper. My store on my website has Whooper fan club t-shirts if anyone wants one. Has Whooper is similar to HazCom, hazard communications, where they're supposed to tell you what you're being exposed to and give you the material safety data sheets and make sure that workers, can exercise their rights and protect themselves. The same thing is true for toxic waste dump sites. It's called Has Whooper instead of HazCom. And it's an OSHA law, and it's under the California Department of Labor code too. So they absolutely had jurisdiction. They just didn't want to and was hoping. And at that point, even then, I didn't know my rights and I didn't know what the statute said, so I couldn't challenge them on it. They're all just trying to avoid doing anything at all.
And the Democratic legislator, the Democratic politicians in California cut the budget of Cal-OSHA $16 million. So these are the Democrats who our unions are supporting, and they won't even fund Cal-OSHA, which has less than 200 inspectors for 18 million workers. So a whistleblower like yourself, try to get this agency and other agencies to defend you and other workers who are being poisoned, who are being retaliated against, and MIA. They're missing
I did get
information.
EPA though to do an inspection. So they tried to ignore me and they tried to like shut it down for like months. They immediately called Apple, and I have the emails of them just being like, sure, this is all fine, like telling Apple it's fine. I'm like, that's the opposite of investigating EPA. You didn't even go there, and you're like, we're sure you're in compliance. Like they're
Who said that
ridiculous.
they were in compliance?
EPA.
EPA. So that's another
The
one.
PR that used to work for Lisa Jackson. I looked her up. She literally used to work for Lisa Jackson. So then, like, Lisa Jackson's own staff is going to Lisa Jackson now at Apple, being like, "We're sure you're super compliant, everything's fine." And so I had to keep getting evidence and like sending emails and it was finally when So when you have these toxic waste dump sites, anyone in this area should know this. This is a very important thing to know. When you're on those sites with the solvents in the groundwater and the soil, they try to evaporate up through the floors of buildings, and that's called vapor intrusion. And so if you get those like TC, PC, they're carcinogenic, they're dangerous, and they can come up through the floor. So if you have cracks in the floor, that's exactly how those vapors can come up. It's really important to have a completely sealed floor, and then they're supposed to port the poisons up to the roof. Apple, though, as you know, did the thing where it went to the roof and then they put it into the HVAC. So all the poison was coming into the HVAC. So when EPA went there, because I sent them pictures of the cracks in the floor, Apple and I got the like final big fight between me and Apple before they suspended me was them admitting that the floor's cracked at our super fun site office with really toxic vapor intrusion history, and that they weren't going to tell EPA and they weren't going to test the air until after they seal it. And I said, you need to test it before to see if we were being exposed and to what and how much. And then how do you know if your fix works unless you know there's issues? And like literally your deed for the property and the covenant says you have to tell EPA and the responsible parties. And they're like, absolutely not. Then the 5-point balancing test again, where they're like, don't talk to anyone about anything. And
And
so
you were
I
getting
sent
sick,
EPA go ahead.
and you were getting sick during this time, and
I fainted at my office, mysterious fainting I'd even told my boss about. So I was like, I'm pretty sure that fainting was probably vapor intrusion, you guys. There was no other explanation. And I only fainted like that again when I was next to that chip fab. So it was like solvent fainting.
in your apartment.
In my apartment next to Apple's fab,
So,
dumping
so
all this
next from the
toxic waste.
office to the apartment, you were getting contaminated and poisoned by this company.
And because of what I learned at the apartment from getting sick there, even before I knew it was Apple, then I could apply that to what was happening in my office. And this is like the know your rights, but also know the science of this stuff, because it's hard to know when they're trying to conceal all of this from people, and you don't know your rights and you don't know how these sites work and you don't know what the environmental compliance is supposed to look like. You can so easily get sick and have no idea why, let alone have any leverage to like raise complaints. And so when I finally got EPA to demand an on-site inspection, and they did come on site, was I was taking pictures of the cracked floor and said, the slab is cracked. You guys are supposed to know about that. And they're like, that's true, we are. We're supposed to. So then they're like, we want to come see the cracked slab, Apple. And then Apple suspended me, quickly fixed the floor before EPA got there. But when EPA got there, they found out that Apple had been venting all those toxic fumes to the roof, but then into the HVAC intake for our office. And so the
Poisoning you
notes,
again.
huh?
That was poisoning you again with poisoning the
And all my coworkers. And I became really alarmed because I'd also learned looking into the history of this area and these exposures, because this is history of Silicon Valley, right? This is 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. These were huge issues in the buildings and the contamination around. Is I was one of the only women because I worked in hardware engineering in the systems engineering team. And in that building, I was like, there was like 2% women, like there's no women. Women get sicker though. We have more sensitive endocrine systems and reproductive systems. We have more fat, so it accumulates the chemicals more. So we're canaries in the coal mine, and we always have been at these shops in Silicon Valley. The women get the sickest. And so if I was fainting, my male coworkers were getting sick too, but they probably didn't know. They probably didn't have the symptoms, but they're still being exposed to the same stuff. So all of that was so alarming to me. And then Apple suspending me, removing me from the workplace, they tried to conceal and not let me find out there was even an inspection. And they fired me like 2 weeks after the inspection,
And
abruptly.
what was the justification of theirs for firing you?
So, I mean, okay, so this will go to the next phase of this conversation. They didn't even tell me when they fired me. They sent workplace violence interrogator demanding to get on the phone with me all of a sudden. And even when they fired me, they just said something about like leaking and not following policies, but wouldn't say what. And it was only like a week later that they had like any kind of hint about what it was. But it was like they fired me September 2021, and I didn't actually get a description of what their supposed reason was until March 2022. You'd think they'd know when they fired me
Isn't
why
that
they were
required? Isn't that
firing.
required that they're supposed to tell you what you're fired for?
I mean, employers get away with murder generally, right? So, but in a retaliation lawsuit, I mean, this is now the rubber meets the road in the retaliation lawsuit. We're 5 years, 6 years into this stuff, and I have summary judgment coming up. It's very rare in a retaliation lawsuit for the plaintiff side to request summary judgment. Usually employers do to try to get it dismissed, but I feel so confident in the case that I know I'm going to win. And Apple knows they're going to lose. So this is actually maybe the first time the defendant side is like, they were saying they're not ready for summary judgment. And they even said in the last like January, they're not ready to present their evidence.
And this is 6 years after you.
6 years. I'm like, I know you have none. That's why you're not ready. You guys.
And they spent maybe 30, $40 million on lawyers. I mean, talk about the law firms. You have law firms for environmental,
Yeah.
issues. You have law firms for labor issues. You have, I mean, there are law firms, I mean, one after another. I mean, union busting law firms.
So wasteful. I know.
I mean,
Okay, so before they fired me too, I had thought, as this was all happening and unfolding, cascading, I'm realizing that like they're horrible. I didn't realize they're so horrible. Apple's like a Tesla. They're like a United Fruit Company or something. Like they're crazy. And so I'm filing complaints with a lot of government agencies of stuff that I was concerned about, their retaliation, their labor violations, and I had press and stuff. And I had also been complaining about like their surveillance of employees and their NDAs, their unlawful NDAs.
they put pictures of you nude, that you were using their benefit.
Multiple examples of them taking nude pictures of me without my consent, and in some cases trying to leverage them to keep me quiet about my complaints, which I've pled as like NXIVM. They're like acting like NXIVM.
I mean, it should
and
be
it's
criminal for that. I mean, that's a criminally trying to shut
for my
people
RICO
up.
lawsuit, if I can get my RICO back, I'm really.
And you charge him with RICO, which is a
I did charge them with RICO,
to
and
violate labor laws, which
it was
is
dismissed. He dismissed it without prejudice, so I could still replete it. He just thought they would fight it and didn't realize they'd fight everything as they are now. And I think the
this
judge
has
made
been going on for 6 years.
so
And
long.
now they're also, as a last ditch effort, they're trying to shut you down again so you don't have a hearing for a summary judgment. And
They're
they'll go
so
to trial.
panicked about
I mean, a
it.
trial with everything that you've gone through, all the documentation. I
Yeah.
don't think they can afford a trial. Could they afford a
They
trial?
can't. They can't. Okay, so to your earlier question to the firms, we now have, I think, like 8 or 9 different law firms, tons of partners. We're over like 20 different defense attorneys. They're pulling in everyone from everywhere. And some of it is responding to stuff in other agencies, but part of it, like when I win something, they fire whatever firm it is and then get one that's like shittier. And then the shittier one now just does like even worse, more corrupt stuff to try to like push it through.
So one law firm after another. They've
Yeah.
got all these law firms fighting you, and they can't stop you. It must be driving them crazy.
And so I think, there's a lot of emotions, I think, happening in the executive office of these firms. And I was like, what if you just followed the law? That's what this was about. Just follow the law.
Well, Tim Cook and these
Yeah.
executives, they think they are above the law, and they've been able to get
But they
away.
generally are, Steve. So, like, why did I have to file a civil lawsuit? I was trying to go through NLRB and Department of Labor. I didn't realize Department of Labor dismisses 99% of stuff. Usually kicks you in the shin as it dismisses your stuff. Like their own metrics say like they only find merit in like 1% of cases. They drag stuff out for years. And then NLRB, even the Democrat NLRB was dragging their feet forever. They finally did issue a complaint. And then Apple got their own attorney in charge of the agency and dismissed the retaliation complaint. Their own lawyer.
Well, Daryl Whitman, who was a labor lawyer at
Yeah.
District 9, Region 9, was doing merit determinations, and they tried to get him illegally to change his report. And then they fired him. They fired the 3 other women, other officers who were disabled. I mean, they destroyed that section in order to shut it down and prevent them from doing their job, who wanted to protect workers and defend health and safety on the job.
In reflection, we don't hear much about that whistleblower protection group, and we should if they were doing their job, because all the businesses would hate them. They'd want to shut them down all the time. Like you have Elon Musk trying to shut down NLRB. You have all these rants about shutting down NLRB because NLRB does do something. They are like toothless generally. NLRB is a problem. We need a much better labor function, but they do enough that businesses hate them. But you never hear about this Department of Labor because they're doing what the business wants. They're like dragging stuff out forever, dismissing stuff, harassing the whistleblower for the business, doctoring reports, all this stuff. So businesses actually love this group, which I think is very like educational for us to like reflect on that.
And it's a captured agency. It's been
It like
captured by the
works for them
company,
directly.
and they
It's
consult
crazy.
with the bosses on how to screw over the workers.
It's wild behavior. And so like as I've gone through this too, I'm like taking field notes. I'm like, I have this unique opportunity to see all this stuff play out. And at this point, I was just so broken by Apple and so just like my breath was taken away by all of the corruption and deranged behavior and I still wanted to keep exposing it because so many people reached out to me as I was going through this from the start of like, thank you for sharing this. I didn't know, or I wish I could say something like this, and for whatever reason I can't. And so everyone really loved this like truth-telling function. And I was studying human rights law and transitional justice, and truth-telling is a function of transitional justice. You want truth commissions. You want to know how stuff actually works. You want people to admit stuff or at least reveal it. And sometimes it can be way more healing than adjudications. You have tribunals and stuff, and everyone's defensive, fighting. But if you can at least get the truth out there, it's a huge like societal healing function. So I've been posting all this. I'm posting articles about Department of Labor, detailing all their horse crap, their emails, all the weird stuff they're doing. They got real mad about that too. But I think it's really beneficial. People need to know that this stuff does not actually serve the workers at all. Generally, does like arguably unlawful stuff on behalf of the employers. And we need to remember that there's underlying regulatory violations when it comes to whistleblowers. It's not just the retaliation cases. So if you have an agency retaliating against the whistleblower, what was that whistleblower's complaint about? Is that being addressed at all? Or is that retaliation helping cover up whatever that original issue was? Which that's generally what they're doing. And that's something everyone needs to care about. Like if we have a
And of course,
statute in
Silicon
place.
Valley was, when they were building it out, they said it's going to be a clean industry. It's going to be safe and clean. I remember that because I grew
Yeah.
up in Silicon Valley when it was coming in, and it was going to save you from doing work, menial work, and it was going to help people out, and it was going to be a betterment of our society. And yet, this behemoth, the tech billionaire fascist, who are above the law and who want a fascist system, they're all rallying around Musk, Elon Musk, and Trump to carry out their agenda. I mean, this is
And
what
it's
they're
not even
doing.
green. I try to tell people, like, the whole green thing was just they don't use smokestacks anymore. And arguably, they should still be using smokestacks. Because smokestacks have the exhaust, the chemicals they're venting are pushed up into the air enough that it's not going to be in the ambient air and it's away so it's not coming into windows and stuff. And when they were doing like chip fab, they're arguing that they don't need to do that, which is not true, actually, because the solvents have vapors. And that was an issue in the 70s. And then they had mostly like tanks and chemicals and stuff. So it was more about the aesthetics of like not having smokestacks was they're clean, but there's tons of chemicals. Chip fab uses more chemicals than any other type of manufacturing in the history of human existence.
And I went to the laboratory. We had a press conference there, and lo and
Yeah,
behold, there's no sign that it's an Apple facility.
none.
I walked up to see the door. There's a sign of dangerous elements at in this factory, and they
Yeah.
tell me to get the hell off.
Yeah.
And I said, "Who are you?" "We're the police." Or they're intimated.
Link to that video, please. That was a great video.
It was bizarre,
It's so
bizarre.
crazy.
Like I'm taking pictures of a sign that
You were
says
taking
that they're
pictures of
hiring
an
Dr.
NF
Bakers.
National Fire Prevention Agency fire
That's right.
diamond for
That's
those
right.
watching. It was a 444W with the cross out. And it doesn't say anything more than that. It's for the fire department generally and like hazardous
But
response
not for
teams.
the neighborhoods, and most neighbors don't even
No one
know
knows what that is. But the
that this
four is the
is.
most dangerous. It's lethal, will detonate, will cause catastrophic fire. And then the W means don't add water or it will get worse. And
And
it's
and
literally
this
like
is right
100 feet
across,
from an apartment.
and this is right across from a condo building where you were living, and you
Apartments.
discovered
It's
this.
like thousands
Traveling.
of apartments. I think 1,800 units, maybe 4,000 people, an open air children's playground. There's no warning signs whatsoever. It doesn't say Apple anywhere. It doesn't say anything about manufacturing. It doesn't give any indication other than that fire diamond, which is around the corner by that front entrance, which they told you do not take pictures and do not get near enough to see it,
So
and
the
then claim to be
public and
police.
the city of Santa Clara knew this, and there are
Yes.
no hearings, no response, no accountability. I mean,
They've
there's
now backtracked. I don't know if I told you that. They had a hearing a few months ago. I found it going through stuff preparing for the citizen suit lawsuit that they've now they didn't admit this chip fab specifically, but this area was a mistake. They shouldn't be putting residential next to it. The industrial, it's heavy industrial. And then I also did get public records requests from their planning department saying next to Apple's fab, like no more apartments. This is like high risk industrial. No, we shouldn't have houses next to this. And I was like, that's a little bit late.
And the politicians, no hearings, no examination. I mean, the control of Apple and these tech companies is so massive
Yeah.
that the politicians, the Democrats, mostly Democrats, they don't even want to have a hearing about this issue. How did this thing get built? Why is it contaminating people? And who's responsible for holding them accountable for health and safety and environmental issues?
Yeah. Well, and I'm going
And
to fight with Bay Area Air Quality Management District right now. Oh, because I got public records requests finally came back from EPA showing that Apple was under criminal investigation over that chip fab in 2024 due to my complaints. And they had a criminal investigator going around gathering information, and he had reached out to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. They should be primarily responsible for
well,
that
that
site.
agency, the CEO for that agency, I covered it, was actually involved in retaliating against the document people there who were collecting documents at the Bay Area Air Quality Control District because they were moving to another office in San Francisco and they were destroying all the documents that had the records of all these companies that had been violating the air quality standards, and they were actually destroying them. And these document handlers said, "No, you can't do this because we need a record to know what the fines are, what the documentation is." They fired these two people, and they wouldn't have a hearing. I mean, they basically criminally conspired to get rid of them, and they wouldn't have a hearing. And these people had a case against the CEO and the management of that board because they were covering up, criminally covered up, in my view, the fact that they were destroying documents that would document violations of the air quality control standards. So, talk about an agency, corrupt agency.
They refused to give the EPA criminal investigator any records. They said they didn't want to. He said, "You did an inspection. Can we see that? Can we see any of your notes?" And they said, "No."
And their local politicians from all over Northern California who are on the board of this agency,
Oh,
and they didn't once say, what the hell is going on?
it's so corrupt.
They
It's so
wouldn't
crazy.
once say, what the hell is going on? Why
I
would
did.
you
I
get rid of the
emailed them. I said, "I
documentation?
just found this. You were obstructing a criminal investigation. You cited them. You haven't done anything for 2 years. What the hell is going on?" And now they're acting all weird and sketch. So that's good information that there's in the background. But I mean, this is just the story with all this Apple crap. And I think Apple really shows there's other ones like Apple that have this kind of pull. Apple's one of the top ones. They're very influential, is the nicest way I can put it.
Well,
Um,
their ads, they're cleaning the environment. They're helping the environment. That's their
They're the
PR.
biggest fraudster. Apple's the biggest fraudster. And they even admit it in like their SEC filings that they make statements that say one thing, but their operations may not match it. And if anyone is able to compare, there will be litigation and regulatory
Isn't
enforcement.
that fraud? I mean, that could be
That's my RICO case. That's my
that's a
scheme in my
RICO.
RICO case that I argued. I just quoted their SEC filings and I said they admit that it's too expensive and onerous to follow the laws. They say that here, quote, and then they say that they'd lose competitive advantage if they had to follow the laws, but they also get in trouble if anyone catches them not following the laws. And so then my third prong is they fill the gap with illegal NDAs, witness intimidation, whistleblower retaliation, and obstruction of justice, which there's actually, that sounds extreme, but it's Apple. So there's a whole library of cases and examples and articles
And
of them doing
workers have
this
been trying
crap.
to organize. There are some of their sales offices or,
The
you know,
retail, yeah, retail's been
retail
trying to
line. I mean,
unionize.
and that's been a battle. CWA
Yeah.
and the IEM have organized them. But I mean, to try to fight Apple uh, is a battle of $1 billion corporation, $1 trillion
A bad
corporation.
faith one. Like they're just known for being like very bad faith conduct. And this has been a reckoning for me of I worked for them so long and I was high up. But you go and you just can easily Google and find all these like articles about this. Scorched earth litigation, just straight up obstruction and crazy behavior. And so then I'm like, what did I take part in? So I think that's one of the things that keeps me going with how like frustrating and exhausting all of this is like I'm culpable too. So this is part of my
But I mean, your
atonement.
record, your website, I mean, the record,
Yeah.
voluminous record of all this material. I mean, it must drive them crazy. I mean, they have lawyers working
Yeah.
to shut you down in every area to prevent this from coming up, and it's on a website.
But they also do like the craziest stuff, like the public records request to Department of Labor showed that they went to OSHA and reported my website to OSHA, including my OSHA position statement, as leaking.
Because you were making health and safety complaints, you were leaking.
The health and safety, and then like the oh, to your earlier question, the why do they say they fired me was the some of the complaints I was making about surveillance and privacy invasions and intimidating employees, and they said that was leaking. I can't tell anyone about that stuff. And I said that's illegal too. And so when I gave up on NLRB because they were dragging their feet forever, and I was coming up on my statute of limitations if I was going to file a civil lawsuit, I decided I was going to file it because California has really wonderful protections for protesting invasions of privacy. California is unique that it has a constitutional right to privacy that's self-executing. It's just like there for anyone living in California. And in the employment context, it means generally that if you are protesting invasions of privacy done by your employer to you, you have protection from being terminated. They can't fire you in California generally if you're protesting that they're invading your privacy, which is pretty cool, actually. Like I think California might be the only state that has that. Probably because of all the celebrities and stuff. I don't know. I don't know how they
And I
actually
mean,
got that
like
on the books.
Rob Bonta, Attorney General of
Yeah.
California, he knows there's systemic violation. I mean, this is a serial criminal operation.
Oh no, they didn't do anything. So this is where I was like, I gotta do it myself. No one's gonna do shit. I gotta do it.
They
This is on
they
me.
could have, they could
Yeah.
have, they could have
So
taken action.
when I filed the lawsuit, I wanted to make sure that I could have a claim. I'm using that among some labor statutes too, but the Tammany termination and violation of public policy claim because it's an established violation of public policy to terminate someone for protesting privacy invasions. And Apple's on the record explanation for why it fired me was me protesting privacy in violations, including the primary example of their evidence is an article published and me quoted and me giving lots of information and complaints called Apple Cares About Privacy Unless You Work at Apple. And then Apple fired me and said that was leaking. So I'm going to win the Tammany claim. Like, there's no way they're getting out of that. That's why they're freaking out right now. And so I was like, I'm going to put you, because when you do the retaliation cases, I'm going to say, like, I did all this environmental and health and safety stuff, and I reported these regulatory compliance issues and all this, and they retaliated against me for that. But also, the reason that they came up with after the fact is also illegal. So if they're just admitting to that, then let's just charge them for that too. Add it to the pile. Because
And
normally,
these law firms, they hire one law firm after another, and they get all mixed up, and they actually confirm, they give you evidence, they give you
yeah,
everything, and because
yeah,
they're not even tied together and how they're fighting you, it seems
yeah.
like they're all disjointed, and it helps you actually because they're crazy in
They're
trying to
so
get.
crazy and they're competitive with each other. Mostly they're not giving me anything or not helping. So I'm mostly just quoting their filings in the other cases and then using it against them to say, you said this, now you said this.
But you got these OSHA documents actually after a long battle.
That was really helpful.
I
And then I
mean,
did get some documents from them in the civil litigation, just a few. And I'm like, I even had to file motions just this week because they've refused to give me any documents related to my whistleblower disclosures, my protected activity, and said it's irrelevant to the whistleblower lawsuit, was their position.
and they also tried to get a judge to tell you to shut up.
So
And
they got really desperate and they're doing something that
they're
was really
panicking.
crazy.
They're really panicking.
They're really panicking, but I want like I could see how this could have worked. And I could see how they could do this all the time in a like more hidden, concealed way and maybe get away with it. And I could see how. So, and I took this lawsuit myself because when I talked to attorneys to see if someone would deal with this for me, no one, most attorneys just won't litigate against Apple. And I could go, we could do just an interview on that at some point. If I've seen it, I can attest to it. I don't blame them anymore. I wouldn't litigate against Apple if I were them either. It's a nightmare. And so, like, they can't make any money out of it. They can end up with like lots of drama and bias from the court, all that. And the ones that do, they're just like, we will, but we're just going to try to settle as soon as possible. So you have to like not say stuff that'll upset them, and we're going to take whatever they're going to give you, and all this. And I was like, what about justice? And they're like, that's not a thing. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to just have to deal this with myself because the whole point is like I want to kick Apple's butt about this. Like I need them to settle too and end this, but like I want to make sure it's exposed what they were doing and they have some accountability. But they're
And
they're a
having
nightmare. Like
accountability against a trillion-dollar company, a company like Apple. I
but
mean,
it's an incredible privilege through this sacrifice I'm making to be able to witness firsthand what they're doing and to be able to report it back to people to expose it, because most of the time these contingency plaintiff counsel, as they admit, will just keep their head down. They're just trying to get that settlement as soon as possible. They're not challenging stuff. They're definitely not tweeting about it like I do. They're writing blog posts about
And they
it.
go crazy. I'm sure every tweet they have to follow you to know what
They
you're
claim they're
doing.
not. They claim they get surprised.
You believe them?
No, they're not, because then they're just liars. They just lie constantly. They're for sure watching stuff. And then they flag stuff too. Like I can tell when they're like mass reporting some of my tweets. Just like it's so weird to have a corporation obsessed with you.
Well, there's that movie, The Corporation,
It's a really good corporate. That movie's fantastic in that
which
book.
talks about the
Yeah.
craziness of corporations, how crazy they are. And it was shown in San Francisco at the Castro. There were 1,800 people. They all stayed, 1,200
Yeah.
people. I mean, nobody left. It was so bizarre. The nature of a corporation and the craziness of these corporations. They're out of control. And
And
they're
the whole
right in the
corporate
state
stuff
now.
started with that Santa Clara County case. I can't remember what the full case name was, but like we hear Citizens United, but the original version of that was a Santa Clara County case where they were giving like due process rights to corporations like 100 years ago. It all kind of started in this one there, where just it's always been a problem here. But so watching these firms though, because they have these top tier firms and these partners, and they'll even admit the stuff they're doing to me is stuff they do in all their cases. And I'm over there just taking notes of like, this is fascinating. I'm learning so much. I'm going to tell all my coworkers because no one has any chance if you don't even know what they're doing. And like when people have an attorney, the attorney's probably not telling them most stuff of what's going on because they're trying to keep their client calm and pacified so they can get that settlement and move on. Which, by the way, too, they're stealing the employees' wages. That really bothers me too because like the lawyers will take like a third of their wages. That's the employees never even made whole. The whole thing's a racket.
When they don't go to prison for illegal activities, I mean, retaliation. I mean, for making a health and safety complaint, that should be a crime. To retaliate against somebody for making a health and safety complaint, should go to jail. And yet
Yeah.
they get off without even fines. I mean, they complain about fines. They challenge fines.
And they're able to conceal so much of the stuff, claiming it's confidential. And so that, like, I knew that was going to be a huge fight because Apple's known to be very, very, like, psychotically secret. Even about stuff that's, like, public, they'll say it's secret. And
And they have a lot of FBI, CIA agents who they've hired
they
to enforce
do. And they
this.
try to scare employees with that all the time. And, like, the trainings and stuff, they'll be like, oh, hi, I'm ex-CIA. Whatever. And then try to talk about like firing employees for stuff and everything's secret. And then they do this. One of the most like nefarious things I think looking in retrospect was this whole thing they'll do on like social engineering of like people are going to try to social engineer you to find out what Apple's doing. So you can't trust anyone. Here's signs someone is contacting you just to find out what Apple's doing. And then they'll be like, and don't talk to your wife about this. Don't talk to your friends. Don't talk about anything internal at Apple is secret. And it's because they're doing crimes all the time. Like in retrospect, looking back at that, it's because as soon as I started talking to people about the stuff, we'd all kind of like realize in real time, we're like, oh, that's illegal. Oh, that was unethical. Oh, they can't do that. So they really,
It's the wild, wild west.
yeah.
It's the wild, wild
It's
west.
and they admit, and so I'm leaning into that even with the current stuff they're doing too, because they're just trying to claim outside of the summary judgment, before the summary judgment, that some of my whistleblower disclosures were leaking and I should be like sanctioned by the court for it, even though it's my lawsuit saying what they did was illegal. And so they're trying to find they're using these lawyers are very, very clever in trying to get rid of lawsuits without ever having to have anything decided on the merits and trying to find even within the court the a way to raise it through like an obscure motion or a dispute or whatever to get an adversarial decision from the court without the court even knowing what it's deciding. And then they build this like list of quotes to take of the things the judges said over the years prior to be like, we already won the case before you even like see the evidence, which makes sense. Like you're gonna have to, why do they make $2,000 an hour to win cases that they should lose? They should lose most of these cases probably, but they don't. They win most of them. So it's been fascinating trying to like to see how they're able to do that. And it's just a lot of trickery and deceit and obstruction, really impressive stuff.
And high paid $1 million lawyers fees.
I wonder how many beach houses they have from just my case. You know, I'm over here homeless, bankrupt, insolvent,
They've
need a
tried to
job,
destroy you. They've tried to destroy you for
and
a
they're
long
lounging
time.
on their pools at their beach houses, making all their blood money. You know, it's
That's right.
it's been very instructive, and I hope it sticks with me for the rest of my life of to be able to see just like how extreme this is. Because this, I think that this is how the US works, especially United States. This is how stuff really operates, and I think it's more comfortable for us to not see that or
Well,
not
the
think
idea
about
of
it.
justice in the United States
There's
in the
not.
Constitution, the idea of having democratic rights in the
Yeah,
Constitution and getting them enforced when you have a corrupt court system, when you have now open fascist government that want to dispense with any of the rules and regulations. And they're
yeah.
saying we're going to do what we want, and what are you going to do about it? Screw you. I mean, there's going to be a march tomorrow, probably of millions of people, but people are getting fed up about the fact that this system, this capital system, is destroying people, going to war, telling people that they're going to be terrorized by ICE, by thugs without any kind of democratic rights. I mean, this is a government out of control, and more people see that.
It is. And like one of the things I'm trying to expose, and there's been a lot of response on social media, which is great, is like some of the tricks they use that no one would think to even look for or know what it is, that they're doing a really good job at concealing and oppressing stuff. So like Apple's current blitzkrieg of motions and send Ashley to jail, da, da, da. Again, this is the
They want to
2026
send you to
version.
jail. They want to send you to
They've
jail.
tried a few times, and I actually found cases where they did send whistleblower employees to jail. I was tweeting about those too. Like I want to write, I would love to write a book about all this at some point. Like it's just the craziest stuff. It needs to be like a graphic novel. But the current one, they're using something called a protective order, and it's supposed to be a procedural tool in discovery and litigation, just for document management. They use this like it's a new NDA. So the court will just stamp it because they don't want to fight
Non-disclosure
about free
agreement
speech.
to shut you up. Another non-disclosure
And they're
agreement.
using it, they're stamping everything they want confidential with this, and it just unilaterally then makes it confidential. So of course they're stamping like whistleblower stuff and their own misconduct. And then now they're saying, oh, because we stamped it confidential, you now have a gag order on you that you can't talk about any of this stuff ever again for the rest of your life. And they said if you want to challenge that, you have to bring it to a judge. But because we said it's secret, you can't tell her what the thing is we said is secret, or else then you're leaking. And then we'll try to get you held in contempt and sanctioned, which is what they're doing right now. Because I said, fuck that. I then went on Twitter and told everyone on Twitter and told the court what they're doing and filed an LRB charge because I was like, that's illegal. That was protected concerted activity that you're saying is confidential. You can't, I don't care what tool you're using to do unlawful work rules and to censor your employees about complaints, but whatever tool it is, it's illegal. Stop it. So they got a new complaint, and then they said that complaint was misconduct. We're like 19 motions in now. They started this in
And
February.
they're paying them fantastic amounts of money to have
And
these
I could
complaints
see how
against
this
you.
would normally work. They launched in with they didn't even file motions to start with. They emailed the judge's staff asking for an like off docket, non-public hearing to get me sanctioned and a gag order and to make me delete my tweets. And my first was like, you can't email the court. You have to file motions. What are you doing? And then I was protesting. I was like, I don't want a like off the record phone call. And the judge she scheduled it for them, this like hour phone call with no public attendance. Like it's supposed to be informal. And she did at one point was like ordering me to like delete my Twitter post. And I had to point, I'm like, Your Honor, you don't even know what they're talking about. You don't even have evidence. You don't know which Twitter posts. She's like, she has a point, Melinda. I do need to see the
What they want to shut you up about. I guess so. You should see
evidence.
what they want to shut you up about, before you
It was
say
crazy. That's
order.
court, right? I have a judge who doesn't even see the evidence, who's issuing like prior injunctions over the phone. And it was a magistrate. She doesn't even have authority to do that. Magistrates can't order injunctions. So I told her, I'm like, Your Honor, you don't even have authority to do that. She's like, fine. But then like, she's literally, I got a transcript. Definitely got that
And
transcript.
that's up too. I mean, it's public now. And they
Well,
must be
Apple's trying to
going
seal it.
crazy.
They said it was leaking for me to post the transcripts. Now they're trying to seal that too. And so, like, this has been so insightful to realize how much stuff happens behind the scenes and how much deference these judges give these huge firms. So, one of the reasons these companies are paying them so much money is if, like, Oric, that's this firm in the civil litigation, if Oric comes in and says whatever, they just believe her. She's a partner at Oric. So, they're like, sure, Melinda. But now the judge is realizing she's like, Melinda, what did you do? Because Melinda's saying like stuff that was like literally my complaints in the lawsuit itself somehow is now secret and I can't talk about it. And like my like stuff that's been public for years is somehow now secret. And then now she's trying to figure out why it's secret. She's like, it's because she was complaining about that thing that's public. The complaint is secret. I think they're going to get sanctioned over this, which they deserve. They deserved years ago.
Well, I think that the desperation that they face after years of battling you now is coming to a head because if there's summary
Yeah.
judgment and if you're able to go forward with these complaints that you have,
They
they're in
did this like
trouble.
a week after he's ordered the case schedule, scheduling the trial and the summary, not just summary judgment. I don't know if I told you this. I had told him that when we do the summary judgment, and he even warned Apple when he's like, "Are you sure you're ready?" And they're like, "Yes, but not yet." Like the judge knows they're going to lose this too, because we're going to do the prima facie of the retaliate. It's like, did you retaliate against your whistleblower? And I'm going to win that. And then they have the affirmative stuff that we can go in the trial, and we'll do like the advanced damages in the trial. But I
And when
said,
is the
Your Honor,
trial scheduled?
October. But I said, Your Honor, I would like to file a motion for preliminary injunction to get my pay back because I'm bankrupt, I'm insolvent, I'm homeless. Like,
Well,
I believe they're going to owe me
they
back
tried to
pay.
intervene in your bankruptcy as well to go after you.
They just sent me an email yesterday threatening me with Rule 11 sanctions in my own bankruptcy. They
This
got a
is
new
Apple.
LRB charge last night over
They
it.
caused you to go bankrupt, and now they're filing complaints against you.
And I'm
This
like,
takes
well,
the
how do you think
cake.
I'm going to pay you? I'm bankrupt. Like, what is this? They're just but is the judge said okay. So I said I want a motion for preliminary injunction to at least get my on payroll again. So like they'll owe me the full back pay when I went on the trial. They'll owe me the front pay, compensatory damages, but I at least want my paycheck ongoing. Just my base, just at least the base pay. And I'm gonna ask for benefits too, so I can get real medical insurance because like half my tooth fell out like a year ago, and I'm on Medicaid, and they just don't fix teeth if you're poor. So I just have like half a tooth. I'd really like some benefits again.
This is
Um,
what they're doing. They're trying to
what they're
destroy you.
doing.
And that's
Uh,
what they're
and
doing.
I think it
This is the
upsets
same
them that,
company. This is the same company that fights single payer, fights against healthcare for workers. So that's
well, and I want everyone to, like, I'm being very open about all of this because I think it's also infuriating Apple that, like, all the stuff that they threatened me they would do has come to fruition, but I'm still fighting and I'm not devastated. I'm definitely like, it's rough and I'll cry and have the bad days and be mad, but like, it doesn't destroy your leg. You can still keep fighting, you can still keep going. And I think that's what
and
they're most upset about. Is they're like, we want her to be dead in a ditch by now, and she's still suing us. And that's a
and the
problem.
fact that if you're able to beat them, one person,
And not
one
even be just survive. Like I think that's also the
survive and
perspective with
beat
these
them. I mean,
huge companies.
that's a dangerous thing.
And the judge said, yes, I can file my motion for preliminary injunction and request to get back on payroll when I file my motion for summary judgment. And then, like a week later, Apple started doing all that deranged crap and accusing me of leaking by talking about my own lawsuit. And they picked the most outrageous topic humanly possible. And they did it on purpose. Like in retrospect, I can see how this would work because it would be so embarrassing. Contingency counsel would never escalate this. A normal worker would be so embarrassed. They'd never want anyone to know. They're never going to bring it to a judge. So they're claiming something that I'd complained about in my deposition transcript is secret, and then claiming now I have this like gag order on me about my own experiences and prior complaints and the stuff that happened, and I have to like go through a meeting, confer with them about it, and then bring it to a judge. And until then, I have this gag order. They chose me complaining that Apple was trying to study its employees' menstruation, cervical mucus, beds. They wanted us to have like our sexual partners sign NDAs as part of their user studies, and I was giving examples of stuff that I felt crossed the line and I had made complaints about before they fired me. And I was talking about raising those complaints to like my manager who ran some user studies, that stuff was too far. And then they said menstruation, cervical mucus are secret. Just those words in association with Apple and Apple trying to study employees' genitals.
And they didn't want people to know it. This is what was about. And
So
they didn't
pulling
want
the
you to tell
string
them.
pulling the string the full way, they have a formal study with Harvard for menstruation and reproductive health. And it was probably front loading employees into that study, what they were doing. There's two options based on what they've been saying too. It could be both at the same time. They're recruiting employees, which is coercive. You shouldn't do that, especially with sensitive health and biometric data. You don't use employees for that. We sorted that out decades ago. But they're trying to get more people into this study to make it look like it's more participation and more data. and using it for product development, or they're running a secret one without disclosing it to their IRB and Harvard and the grants and the papers they're publishing. So either way, you have tons of regulatory compliance violations, let alone the invasions
What
of
about
privacy.
HIPAA? What about HIPAA? I mean, this
In
product.
addition to all the internal that those issues too, right? And they even admit in their SEC filing that that stuff is really they get cause a lot of litigation and regulatory issues, but that compliance is too onerous and expensive. And if they were to have to comply, then they would lose their competitive advantage compared to their competitors who do follow the law. So
And they went crazy when you put that out. They wanted you
So
to.
they went crazy, and I filed an LRB charge and talked about why I was not going to participate in a meet and confer about why. And I said, Apple does not own intellectual property rights to my vagina. This is insane. You are even saying that. It's so offensive. It's so invasive. But that's the thing where, like, if they did that, they think to a normal person who also has not just been. I'm so over all their crap at this point, 5 years in. I'm so just burnt that I'm like, well, I'm just gonna tweet this all because you guys are crazy. I have no shame left. I'm just gonna put it all out there because I think
Let
this
it
is
all hang out. You want to do this, Chris? Let it
self-indictment.
all hang out.
All
Let it
hang
all hang
out. And
out.
so, and then they get mad. She's like, she's still tweeting about her menstruation and her cervical mucus. We said that's secret. And then I'm tweeting, they're saying again, it's secret. I'm tweeting about my vagina. And I'm like, why? So I kind of appreciate that they chose something so outrageous and extreme, and people are just like, what is she even talking about? And then they'll look at the motions and they're like, what is Apple doing? They're like, the story is somewhere.
They're publicizing their own activities. They're
And
crazy.
that's why they want me to shut up. Because I
Yeah.
pointed out, I'm like, this is public. You have it on clinical trials. You have press releases saying you do these kind of studies. Not my own body is confidential, which is like, I was like, this is like sexual assault via discovery process. This is like very strange
It
interaction.
is sexual assault.
It's really, so I'm just exposing it. And then they're trying to tell the court, oh, sanction her and seal all this. So I really escalated this last week where they decide to also claim like code words are confidential, all this stuff. And it's all public. So I just did a request for judicial notice of all the public records of all the stuff they say is secret that's already public. But they had said that I can't even show that stuff or say that stuff because they unilaterally claimed it's secret, which is just a crazy, like, I think even though these judges have so much deference for Apple and Oric and don't like pro ses, maybe don't even like whistleblowers, but just Apple's being so outrageous, I think they're going to get sanctioned over this.
This is good. They should be.
They
And
should be.
it's all
And
there. Your documentation and everything is up on your website.
that's the problem for them.
That is the problem. That is the problem.
Yeah.
People can
But
find out exactly what you're saying and exactly all the experiences you've had in this battle for your rights, for workers' rights, and for environmental rights.
we should
Because
put the docket up too. I made sure it's on a public docket so anyone can read whatever we're filing. You can go see all those filings and follow it. And like my main thing for exposing all this too is like I want my coworkers to know what they're doing, that they do this stuff. Because I was so take it like off balance, realizing just how aggressive they are and how they've already rigged all the processes. And that's why they didn't care. That's why they act so crazy with me when I was still there because they knew there was such a tiny chance they'd ever be held accountable because they
they
had
had no idea that this battle with you was going to lead to the systemic exposure of all their operations, of how
I
they
was a program and project manager. I don't give up on projects. It was my job for over a decade to make sure every project is led to completion unless there's stakeholder agreement to cancel it. And I'm my
they
own
picked on the
stakeholder.
wrong person and also a woman.
I know.
They thought they
Yeah.
could control a woman, that they could break you.
Especially about like the bodily autonomy stuff, like a male dominated field and company, and there definitely were like sexism and sexual harassment issues and stuff too. But them also like choosing the reason they fired me was me complaining they were taking secret naked pictures of me in my home. Like that just I just put my foot down. And then with the environmental stuff, a lot of times it has been women. I think it's kind of like this like mom instinct sometimes if you want to protect your community and you want to protect the people around you. But like Lois Gibbs types, like you have women oftentimes that do just step up. Um, I think that's why they've also just tried to destroy my life as much as humanly possible. Just hope I give up. But again, I don't give up. It's in
And it's
my
their worst
resume.
nightmare now because having a whistleblower that's successful, a worker that speaks up for their rights and fights an entire company, a multi-billion dollar company, and is able to not only hold them off, but to expose their methods.
Yeah, and we're
That
getting
has
to
been
a really
accomplished.
interesting period. I mean, they've done a very good job of getting like, mainstream press generally isn't writing about most of this. And they've gotten articles to be like, oh, most of her case was dismissed. All of her case was, I'm like, I have like 17 active claims. What are you even talking about? But they've done the manufacturing consent stuff. For me, I was looking at my Wikipedia article again today where it just says, Ashley, she was fired for leaking intellectual property and NLRB dismissed all of her charges. She's a nut job. It's like the Wikipedia article. Anytime someone meets me and looks up my name, that kind of stuff will drive people mad. It drives me mad. But at the same time, I'm like, it's not going to look great for them when I win in 2 to 5
That
years.
is a disaster. That is a disaster.
Yeah. So I also want people to see that like you can do that. It takes a long time. And when I talked to attorneys about doing this myself in 2021, they warned me. I was like, if I want to do this myself and I feel confident I'm going to win, what does that look like? And they're like, usually about a decade to get through all the appeals, to move it all through. It usually takes about 10 years. And I said, okay.
And the thing about the unions, the labor movement, should be supporting you. I mean, the
They're all
union should be
captured
fighting.
though. They like work for Apple.
Yeah, that is a problem.
All these big
I mean,
unions.
and Google too. I mean,
Yeah.
they're negotiating with Google, the CWA, and they won't fight Google. I mean, they're
Yeah.
negotiating the layoffs. They're not
We
saying
need
you
more
got to stop the
independent
layoffs.
unions in the San Francisco Bay Area, especially Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, like Ted Schmidt types back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of activity that was also community organizers plus unions and mixed groups because this area is big on community plus workplaces because of all the pollution and contamination and hazards and risks.
And we need, I mean, the tech workers now, they're using AI to get rid of tech workers to do coding, and
Yeah.
tech workers are under assault. We need on May Day a mass tech workers march of tech
Yeah.
workers. They all should be organized because they're using the layoffs as a means of terrorizing tech workers so they won't organize, so they won't speak out, so they can get away with murder. And that's
And their
really
NDAs and all that stuff. And like the interview on AI week for San Francisco, the San Francisco Library, I did with you, I think in December or January.
December,
Uh,
yeah, December
yeah,
13th at the San
we should
Francisco
link to that
Library.
too because I really want to expose in that interview how what they're doing to me because I was trying to protest stuff they're doing for AI, data collection, product development. So in that sense, I was an AI whistleblower, even though I'd say mostly like I'm an environmental whistleblower, but they're like, we fired her for the AI stuff. And I'm like, I guess I'm an AI whistleblower too now. But that stuff I was trying to expose. I'm like, this is unethical data collection. It's non-consensual. You can't, like, employees can't consent to some of this stuff. It's just impossible. Like GDPR says, like, you can't consent. And then some of it too, it's on their devices and it's picking up people around them who have no idea, no rights. And so if I'm the example of someone who's trying to expose that they're doing unlawful, unethical stuff related to AI development, and they say it's a legitimate reason to fire someone for making those complaints and disclosures, that's a problem. And then you
So
see how they're treating me.
by fighting for you, you're fighting for the protection of workers who are being surveyed and being tested and data illegally taken from them. So it's a question of protect these whistleblowers and AI, the tech workers, because you're
Yeah.
protecting yourself actually. And
And for
look
the
at what's
community,
going
I
on.
think the community sometimes thinks of the tech workers, and some of them are, the tech workers just don't care. They're not whatever. They're like, you need to stand up for us. But I want them to know that there's a lot of us that, even if we were complacent like that and decided to file a complaint, that's what happened. The company's like, what if we just set you on fire instead? So, like, I think that's again, like the community and workers need to come together on this organizing and not just assume it should be on one or the other. We have to have each other's backs because they're going to go after everyone. And the employees are the ones that have the documents. Apple flipped out that I took so many documents with me and gave them to the regulators and could be like, here's that email of them asking for that illegal thing. Um, and so that's their like worst fear. That's why they're like NDAs and secrecy, and we're gonna send CIA after you.
Exactly. The,
This.
the, the whole the whole apparatus is going to be directed to shut you down.
So if we can have each other's backs, and I think, acknowledging that a lot of these big unions are super captured, especially with these huge companies, and they don't necessarily have the resources to have like AI and privacy lawyers to go after that for like
And
a
also
labor
you have
union.
to, it's like a battle, it's a war, it's a class war. And right
Yeah,
now it's a one-sided class war.
yeah,
That's the problem because these companies like Apple are going to war with the workers and there's no fight back.
yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about. We
And
need,
no one can even see it. So like that's why I'm like just constantly like, let me tell you about what's happening now, you guys. Let me put more on my website. Someone make sure your internet archiving it in case something happens to me. Is like we have such little visibility into what's actually happening behind the scenes with this stuff. And from like my story, it's so far worse than most people imagine. And I think we have to reckon with that and know how bad it is because it should cause everyone to want to act. As soon as I started seeing it, that was my mayday, my personal mayday of like, oh, this is really, really. But then realizing I still had my foot in the door, I could get documents, I could try to like talk to the regulators while I was still there. I had connections with the employees. I hadn't agreed to any kind of settlement or gag order yet. So that was the opportunity. But unless people, I think, realize like how critical it is to expose this stuff and work with each other and try to put pressure on them when you can
and,
actually have
and build
pressure.
solidarity. Build solidarity.
Yeah.
Workers, if they unite and build solidarity, have power. And
Yeah, they
I think
do.
that's what we have to. That's what we have to build in
And to
this
fight the
country.
division, like a lot of these companies too, like they own these like social media forums and stuff, and they have fake accounts. And I got a firm on mine and who was fighting a couple of the unions who was going in with a fake account and trolling them about like anti-union stuff. And I found it was MWE, the law firm, and I found what lawyer it was. A
And the
coworker actually
anti-union
helped me.
law firms they've hired to fight you.
A lot. But I mean, that's to that point though. He was also fighting some of those unions and trashing them too. But they're trying to cause like a lot of division as well. So I think helping workers just realize how crappy these law firms are and companies are and the stuff they'll do so we can call it out. Because I think also there's so much power in being like as soon as I posted, I was like, it's MWE. Look, I found it, you guys. It's them. That was them. And then like posting it like now they're roasted. It's kind of the steal their weapons and use them against them theory. For me, it's documentation of like I'm gonna, be able to prove it's them doing all this crappy stuff,
you
document
want
and
you want to
publish
play.
it.
You want to play. You have to pay.
I don't want them to do this stuff in
That's
darkness. It's
right.
very effective in darkness, and it's not effective at all with daylight. As soon as you see it under daylight, everyone starts coming together and being like, "Oh my God, what are they doing?"
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much. We've been talking with Ashley Govik. She has been in a long struggle over years to defend her rights to speak out about health and safety, about the environment, and she has learned tremendous lessons about who she's dealing with and been fighting law firms all over the world who've been focused on her. And we're getting close to a summary judgment. We're getting close to a trial, which is a big development, a big victory. And
Yep.
the company is panicking. They're going wild. The
You might
close.
have to put me on payroll in June.